Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special edition of the Jazz Flyte Podcast. In case you haven't heard, one of the best saxophone players ever made has passed away this past week, a couple of days ago. His name is David Sanborn. We're going to take about 30, maybe 40 minutes to kind of go back and reminisce about the effect that David Sanborn had on the music, had on us. And when I say us, I've brought along a gentleman who was the former program director of the Wave. His name is Mark Ribbins. Mark, welcome, and thank you for assisting.
Darrell, thanks so much for the invitation. Always a pleasure to sit down and chop it up with you.
We go back to, well, we won't say how long we go back. So let's talk about the David Sanborn thing. I'm sure you have heard he has passed away. Just some fond memories you have of him at this point in your life.
I think it all kind of goes back to my brother's bedroom. So my brother's 6 years older, and I would sneak into his room when he wasn't home and listen to his albums. And when I first heard the Straight to the Heart, or was it Hideaway? One of those two albums from the late 1970s, early 80s, and was just blown away. I mean, listening to R&B stuff, listening to gospel stuff, but to hear the sounds that this man was pulling out of the saxophone was really amazing to me, and it enhanced the love that was growing in me for contemporary jazz. And then later on, to be able to see him in concert, see him perform, to chat with him a little bit backstage, to interview him by phone, my admiration for the man grew because, like a lot of the people that we deal with over the years, he was just regular people. Phenomenal talent, but just a regular guy.
So tell me real quick, let's start the show off with one of your favorite songs by David Sanborn. What might that be?
I'd start out, I think, with a tune that he did with Joe Beck, called Texas Ann. So the album was originally titled Beck. It came out of the Rudy Van Gelder studios in the mid-'70s. And I guess when David began to make more of a name for himself in the jazz pop world, it was re-released as Beck and Sanborn. And I think that's around the time I picked it up. But again, just David had a way of ringing everything out of a note on his saxophone. And Texas Ann, to me, is one of the best examples of that in his mid-early work.
I think it's funny that you mentioned that on an album that really isn't, let's say he isn't the primary person, because there are 25 total um, recordings that he did where he was a solo artist. It's an excellent song, Mark. I like that because I don't remember hearing that, and I will admit this, I am older than you, so my history of David Sanborn probably goes back maybe a little further because his first album was called Taken Off. Um,
Okay, yeah.
yeah, so it was, and I think one of the things about David, like you said, if you had the chance to meet him or talk to him, it was just like you're talking to your neighbor. He was that much down to earth. He was that much just a regular guy, and you could talk to him about music and about a whole bunch of other things. One story I will tell real quick. Um, there was a period of time, I'm going to say in the 80s or 90s, where he was coming to concerts here at least once a year. And a couple occasions,
Hmm.
he came twice in a year. And we had a relationship. He called, he says, "Hey, I'm coming to Cleveland. Are you coming to the show?" And I said, "No." And it was like, "What? What do you mean you're not coming?" I go, "David, has the show changed? It's the same songs." He goes, "Yeah." Then I've heard them before. I'd rather sit down and have lunch with you. And lo and behold, that's what we did. So, like one of my favorite songs, which is it's a great love song, and it's just called Lotus Blossom, and it's just so
Mm.
sweet. And what you wanted to do is just sit back and listen to it. And I have another story related to that kind of comment. But he was just it hooked me. That is probably the earliest song that I remember is Lotus Blossom, which is just such a sweet romantic tune.
It's beautiful.
All right, Mark, I'm going to throw it back to you. Give another memory you have of David Sanborn and another one of your favorite songs.
Well, I'm glad that you played that because Heart to Heart was the album that I was reaching for that I would sneak into my brother's room and check
Mm,
out.
hmm.
Um, and the thing that you mentioned about, not going to his show because had the songs changed or not, David was a great one for it. Even when the song lineup was the same, the performance was going to be different.
Hmm.
Um, with the great bands that he brought through, particularly when Marcus Miller was in the set, and Hiram Bullock, you never knew
Yes.
what to expect. And just, kind of, we think that people will be with us forever and they're not. But when you think about what we've lost with David Sanborn and Hiram Bullock no longer being around, Don Grolnick is another one. It's kind of a tough loss to swallow, and yet we still have their great catalog. Um, let's see, where do we go from here? There was a thing that he did, a later collaboration with Bob James called You Better Not Go to College. And I've got a fun story about him and Bob James too. I'll share that later.
Mhm. Mark, go ahead and
David
share
was,
that story.
well, I love that song because, David was pretty serious about not getting labeled as a smooth jazz musician.
Yes,
Um,
correct.
so to stretch out into something like that moves a little bit more towards straight ahead was really cool for me. So a couple years ago at Kane Park, I had a chance to interview Ben Sidran, who wrote a book about Tommy LaPuma. Tommy LaPuma told the story of the Double Vision album with James and Sanborn, and that they were both reluctant at first to do it. And then when they got in studio and they started working on it, and it was clicking, but then in the mix down process, it was kind of a battle of wills. Bob was like, it needs more piano. And Dave's like, it needs more saxophone. And finally, Tommy LaPuma says, okay, guys, leave for an hour. Just let us work this out.
I could see that.
Uh, and then Sanborn calls after it's released. And he's like, do you see the reviews? And people, they hated it. The terrible reviews. And Tommy says, relax, man. Tomorrow they'll be using it as fish wrap. And of course, it sold like 5 million copies.
Yes, yes. That is that's a wonderful song. And speaking of that song, it's one of the few albums where David is, I want to say, assisted by great musicians. You mentioned Hiram Bullock. You mentioned Marcus Miller, who I think is perhaps the second greatest bass player of all time.
Okay.
Don't ask me who's first, because I will make up stories. Um, but that whole album, with those two, and I'm not going to forget the third person, Bob James, David Sanborn, and someone, um, was just tremendous. And the whole album, from beginning to end, is
Yeah.
wonderful. And Maputo is just, it's a driver of a song. You know what I mean? It's a song that you play it. Oh, I'm going to play it again. Oh, I'm going to play it again. So
Mhm.
since we're going to play it ourselves on this here version of the Jazz Flight Podcast. Here's Maputo. Oh, if the people
Yeah.
could see the producer, she's having a wonderful time listening to this music. That's what we like to see. The one thing about that song too is that's a song, if you have it on in your car, you're going to hit repeat, and it's
Oh yeah.
long enough to take you wherever you need to go. Mark, while you're at the radio station, do you have memories of David?
Yeah, I think it was 2018, right around 2018, that he was coming to play Tangier. And we had to kind of hastily arrange a phone interview for the show that was coming up that weekend. Um, and I had read that he was starting his Sanborn sessions, the video series that he put together with different artists. People described it like the TV show that he did, Night Music, um, taking that and turning it on its ear for a new generation, and having a couple of musicians kind of just bounce musical ideas back and forth off each other. So, we get on the phone and I said, hey, is there anything you want to make sure that we mention, new project or whatever? And I mentioned, I've heard about Sanborn sessions. He was so pleased that
Hmm.
somebody already knew about that
Right.
happening. And, again, just the genuine joy of, yeah, this is something I put together. I think it's kind of cool.
I think he assumed that, how do I want to say this? We already knew about it, but he was kind of unsure. He was kind of in his
Mhm.
world doing his thing, and I don't know if he took the one thing I remember is David played loud. Um,
Yeah.
and it was just but it didn't bother you. You just knew it was loud. I have this one story that I will tell right now. Eh, I went and saw him at the Akron Civic Theater, and I purposely sat in the very last row. If I reached back, I knocked on the wall. So I see him afterwards, and he's like, "I was looking for you." I go, "I was in the very last row." Why? I go, "Because sometimes you just want to listen to the music. That's all it was." And he was one of those artists where you could sit back and just relax, close your eyes, take all your troubles were gone because you were listening to David Sanborn. And in that era, is there another song that you can think of that you really like, Mark?
I would probably go back to Run for Cover, again, because of his amazing phrasing and the bass work of Marcus Miller, which is just par none. One of my all-time favorites, and it's another driver. If you want to get into a workout, if you want to just kind of jump on the bike and move yourself and get some cardio, Run for Cover is the one.
Real quick, Portia, before and you can probably start it now. The live version or the studio version?
Hmm. I like the live version.
Okay, all right.
So, Daryl,
Nice.
tell me, what is it like to hang out and have lunch with David Sanborn?
Felt like I was talking to a buddy I went to high school with. Talked a little bit about music, talked about what was going on, talked about other people. I think he would be shocked in the conversation I had with him, shocked at the number of young saxophone players who want to emulate him, who listened to him growing up and all that sort of stuff. He's a really humble guy. Um, we, he wanted to know what I was doing, what's going on in my life at that time, but it was just, it wasn't, and I've been fortunate. I've had conversations with a couple of musicians who were all kind of in that same ilk of just, let's just talk. Let's just do this. We don't want to talk about music. Um, and I did mention to him that he played loud. He goes, "Can you hear me?" I'm like, "Yes, sir, I can hear you." He goes, "Do you like it?" "Yes, sir, I like it." Then it's fine. And that was it. It was. I think there are times when I go to his concerts, and I went to a lot of them, and I have a lot of David Sanborn CDs. You can probably see a couple over my head right now.
Yeah.
But it was kind of, I don't want to say like seeing a friend. He was just your musician buddy who knew how to play and knew how to play well.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think I really liked is there are a lot of saxophone players. There seems to be some kind of throatiness in the way he plays, and when he soloed with David Bowie or whoever, you knew it was him. His sound was very, very unique, and not many people have recreated that sound. And that was it. It was like, that's David Sanborn. How do you know that? I can just tell. It
Hmm.
was the things he did. It was one of my, one of my favorite things, and this is not on our song list. Is when he played with Al Jarreau. And the thing I appreciated about both of them, when David would solo, I go, "How do you follow Al Jarreau?" I mean, because Al's all over the place, and he's making up
Uh-huh.
lyrics, and he's doing this, and he's doing that. But you know when to come in, and then when you do your solo, guess what? It's the same thing. It's what do you do? Um, but it was special. It was, when this happened, of course, you go back and you start pulling out CDs, so your music room or whatever you want to call it is a mess because the albums and CDs are all over the floor.
Yeah.
Because in listening to one song, it makes you think of another song. It makes you think of Lisa or
Hmm.
different things like that. And the hit after hit after hit. There's some neither one of us, I think, is a tremendous song.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on that
Very well
album, there's
done.
Backstreet and there's some other things, but
Blue Beach.
You looked forward to David Sanborn's next project. How about you? What
Absolutely.
what 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 do you think is the best project in your mind? This is a tough question.
Yeah, that's a real hard one. I still go back to the live Straight from the Heart,
Hmm.
um, because the performances there, not just him but the surrounding band, and if you have a chance to go and check out some of the video that remains from that, Don Grolnick again, amazing on piano and organ there. One of my big time favorites. But I had to go back and cheat when you mentioned Al Jarreau. I had to go back and look at the lineup for the the Double Vision album. So you got
Mm-hmm.
Bob James, David Sanborn, Paul Jackson Jr.,
Paul Jackson Jr.
Eric Gale,
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Miller, Steve Gadd, Paulinho da Costa, and Al Jarreau. How's that for a lineup?
Here's always my question. I don't know if you've ever thought of this. How do you get that group of people together? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure we might want to substitute a couple maybe here and there, but that core band was just, they were awesome.
Mhm.
Um, and you wish sometimes that, maybe they played more, maybe they did a little less, maybe they changed this hook. But once again, sitting in the back row, just chilling, um, listening to David Sanborn and his band, and he allowed his musicians to play and grow and expand. And when Marcus did a couple of CDs, a couple of solos, and Hiram Bullock, who was just a great guy, I got a chance to talk to him,
Mhm.
was they were so good and they worked so well together.
So well together.
And I think that's what the main thing is. They work so well together. Another choice of yours. What do you have? Or is it my turn?
Um, I think it's my turn.
Okay,
I
go ahead.
think. Um, Songs from the Night Before, 1996, was when I was going through some personal changes. And really, again, it was one of those, when's the next Sanborn album out? And I sat and listened to this thing over and over again. The song called Ricky was kind of moody the way that fit
Hmm.
the mood that I was in at that point. So Ricky's the one.
I think you find that's, for lack of a better term, that's somewhat of a obscure song, but I'm sure
Hmm.
there are many fans out there who know exactly what it is. And I think that's the other thing about David and his work.
Yeah.
There might be one, two really strong hits on there, but you had to listen to the whole thing because you'd find different songs that were just as good or at least on the same level. And that's why, and you and I were both, I'll call us music directors at the radio stations that we worked at. When a Sanborn project came in, you listened from track one to the very last track. It
The
didn't
very
matter.
last one.
And fortunately, especially in my case, I had no restrictions. So I could play every song on the album. But all that did once again was make me think about other songs. Um, and the one song I think that put David on the map, and it's to those novice people back in the day when it was smooth jazz, contemporary jazz, fusion, or whatever they wanted to call it, was
Hmm.
Hideaway.
Yeah.
It's a great tune. It's tremendous. It's upbeat. But Hideaway, I think, was the song that really started the career of David Sanborn.
Hmm.
Tough question. What technically, Mark, and you probably have many of them, but what is your strongest memory of David Sanborn? What's your best memory of him?
His his runs, as in addition to his sound, but his runs inspired a generation of sax players.
Hmm.
I remember having a conversation with some jazz lover friends over a couple beers, probably 25 years ago,
Beverages,
and
beverages.
they these were guys who were, for the most part, 20 years older than me. So they were talking about, uh, Dizzy and Bird, and the
Hmm.
generation of bop that we grew up adoring. Made our way up to Grover, and they started talking about, well, who now? Since you're working in the smooth jazz thing, is it Kenny G? And like, nah, Kenny G's not going to cut it. But Sanborn is going to be the person that people try, probably unsuccessfully, to pattern themselves after,
Hmm.
because his playing was rhythmic, his sound was unique, um, and it was very vocal in a way.
Yes.
Uh, Listening to him was like listening to vocalese.
Hmm.
How about
I
for you?
man, I doing a radio, and I got him on the phone, and we're just kind of reminiscing about stuff, and him coming here, and he would ask just all kinds of questions about the area, where to go to eat, and stuff like that. Um, and also, here's the one thing that I was kind of feeling myself. I'm working at the radio station, but I'm also working for the Cleveland Indians up in their scoreboard room, and they needed somebody to play the national anthem. I don't think it was opening day, but it was for a game. So I get on the phone, I make a call, and I ask, can we get David to play the national anthem at an Indians game? Manager gets back to me. He goes, yeah. So now, don't get me wrong. You've been through this. I am the man. I am the man.
Right.
Lo and behold, he shows up at the stadium and it's raining. And I'm like, oh, this is
Oh
just
gosh.
horrible. His manager, who I think lived in Brecksville, they got this big umbrella. They go out on the field. He's holding the umbrella, and David's playing. Yes, I have my favorite anthem songs, at the ballpark or basketball game or wherever. Dude, it was so good. And everybody, there's 28 people on the scoreboard crew. 27 people turned around and looked at me and goes, "You know him?" I do.
I
Because
love it.
I am the man.
The man.
Um, and then once he got done, he comes up in the scoreboard room and he's hanging around asking questions and what are you doing? What's this going on and everything. And it was, once again, it's just your guy going out I haven't been here before. This is an environment I'm not used to. I just want to have fun while I'm here and learn about all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he thanked me afterwards, as did the manager. He goes, and I think they stayed for the first 4 innings of the game, and then he comes back in and goes, "Hey, thanks a lot. I greatly appreciate this." Now I'm sure he has played anthems at other ballparks or other facilities, but this one was special because, don't get me wrong, I had a little bit to do with it. So it made me feel good. Mark, I believe you have one last song that's one of your favorites.
I thought I'd given all of mine out. Let's
You
see.
get
Where's my
all
list?
four?
I think I did all
Okay,
four.
so Mark's done, so it's up to me.
It's
And
up
I
to
can't
you.
remember, but I'm hoping Chicago song is on that list. All right, so I don't know if many people remember. There's a lot of times when he did some really up tempo stuff, and it was called R&B instrumental. And then he comes out with this song, Chicago song. I go back to my days at the ballpark when the White Sox would come in, we'd play this song, and about 8 people in the ballpark knew who it was, and one of them being the as we call him, the mayor of the ballpark, Jim Folk, and we loved it. But Chicago song was the one song that provided energy. It made you move. You tapped your feet, and you just paid attention to it. So let's take
Mhm.
a quick listen to Chicago song. I also want to say, how many of us tried to play the sax and sound like David Sanborn? Not me, because I realized a long time ago that playing an instrument was not for me. I can't do the manual dexterity of the piano, and I didn't have the lung capacity to play a woodwind instrument. I wasn't doing that. Mark, I greatly appreciate this. Hopefully, in other times we can do something together again, because you and I have a great history and a love of this music. Um, but I think this guy had an effect on our lives. It helped you through a part of your life, whether it be good or bad. There were
Sure.
songs that provided you with joy. There were songs that provided peace. Um,
Hmm.
it was just wonderful. How about you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as I look at the CDs behind you and associate and attach a memory with each one of those covers, um, and thinking about the stuff that I listened to when you said, "Hey, choose a few songs," and it's like, there's "Rain on Christmas." No, I don't use
Um,
that one. And just going through the variety, but the effect that the man has had on the jazz music world will absolutely never be forgotten. And for those of us who've been fortunate enough to broadcast and to play this music for the people, meeting him and having the experience of just being around him, I'll never forget.
yeah, yeah. It was he's a one in a million. I believe that's a song by him. Um, it's amazing how we get these things in there. Yeah, when Portia, who was the producer of the show, suggested this, and it's like, think of songs. Let me see. I got 3 CDs behind me, 2 on my desk, and probably 12 more in the rack. And you just go. I mean, I think of Smile, Lotus Blossom's a
Hmm.
very old tune. There's just so many. And then we're not going to talk about the collaborations that he did, whether it be Jarreau, Bob James, or anybody else. There was always a feeling that he provided.
Hmm.
In doing this podcast now, I've talked to several saxophone players, and they all mention him. Matter of fact, they all mention him and Grover Washington Jr., my two
Yeah,
favorite saxophone players. Um,
absolutely.
there will be, and Mark, I'm going to bet a dollar to a dime, you're going to create a David Sanborn playlist that you will have and you will play, and it will always be there. I'm working on mine,
For sure.
just so you have it. But man,
And
it was. Go ahead.
some of the gems that will be on my playlist will be a little bit of an oddity for some people, like "How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You" by James
Yeah.
Taylor, just
Yes.
so I can hear that sax lick.
Yes. And don't get me wrong. Probably, I liked Bang Bang,
Yeah,
but it doesn't make the top 50 list. You know what I mean?
no,
It's a great song, but there's so many other things that you think of. Um, I am
sure.
I'm very happy that you blessed me with coming on and speaking your mind about David Sanborn and all the things that he did. Um, I don't want to. I want the circumstances to be different the next time that you and I get together. I don't want you and
Yeah.
I to get together and be talking about the fact that someone has gone on. I want us to talk about maybe somebody new, an Adam Hawley, Randy Scott, or somebody like that,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
we're still in the business
Right.
in some way, shape, or form, and we got to get this music out there because back in the heyday, mine and yours, this was the music. This was it. There was so much of it. Um,
Right.
but you had your people that you could count on. Maybe it was a dry day or dry month for releases, and then all of a sudden David Sanborn would release something, and you're like, okay, all is now right with the world, and we got hits on our hands. But I just think it's this was special. We'll get together and do something else again. I'm sure somebody will have some kind of comment, good or bad, about the two of us working together. So, once again, I appreciate this a great deal. Glad you were here. This ain't gonna be the last time. I can tell you that right now.
Thanks. Thanks for the
Um,
invite, man. It's a pleasure. All the way back to the first time you let me sit in on Jazz Flight, which I will never
stop.
forget.
Stop. Oh my goodness gracious.
That's
And
it,
I
folks.
don't
That
think
that is the reason that I wound up in jazz radio is that Darrell Scott one Sunday night let me sit in on Jazz Flight.
I don't I, Mark, I truly appreciate that. I cannot lie. Um, as I tell people, I tell one person right now, um, I wasn't a great basketball player, but I was one of the better point guards of all time because I like making other people look good. And
There it
he was
is.
one of those. It was great to pass the ball to you. We have a mutual friend in Alexander Zonjic who loves you more than anything and wants us to do some things together. So we will do that. We will collaborate, as they say at the old job, and we'll make this work. And I think you and I have fun doing this. And I think the other fun part is the fact that we get to tell people about this music and get to play it for them and let them know.
That's very much the sentiment that you expressed was something that I like to tell a lot of musicians when they would come and thank us for playing their songs.
Right.
And my response was, we're the curators, we're the librarians.
Right.
You
Exactly.
guys are the writers.
Right.
So all we're doing is getting the material to the people. You're doing the hard lifting.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody to listening to this second. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I hope you enjoy these stories and soulful melodies that grew through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Darrell Scott.